My name is Rose Murder, and I will be presenting on a first part series on modal auxiliary. Come with me. Let's take a tour onto Discovery Street. Do you know what are modal auxiliaries? Modal auxiliaries or modal verbs are used to change the meaning of the other verbs. It can also express the mood or attitude of the speaker. Once we use the main verb, modal verbs do not end with S for the third person singular. Modal verbs never change form, but they have a different form for past tense. Modal auxiliaries are also used to express obligation, give advice, talk about possibility and probability, also ask for permission. Let us look at the modal verbs. These are the modal verbs: can, may, should, must, will, could, might, shall, would, ought to, have to. And we spoke earlier about modal verbs do not use S for singular third person. Let us look at what is displayed here for the present and the past tense. For the present tense, we know that will and the past tense would have been would or used to. Can, could, must, have to, may, add to, should, ought to, had better, might, should, ought to. Bear in mind that the words that are in bracket, those are not modal, they are semi-modals. They are semi-modals verbs. Modal verbs can also be divided in three main categories based on their meanings. They are permission or possibility or ability. And we see where these modals are: can, could, may, or might. Obligation or necessity, must or should. Volition or prediction, will or would. Let us therefore look at some of the examples that we have here. For the first one, which would have been prediction, will or would, we would have seen that will indicates a willingness to do something. And the negative form of that would have been will not, which indicates there's an unwillingness. Let us use that in a sentence. For example, I will give you another opportunity. Would also indicates general or repeated willingness. In the past, it also indicates preference in the present. For example, I would like to make a toast. Can, could, may, or might. These modals express possibility and ability. Can indicates the ability, could indicate ability with option. For example, I can do it. The subject I is sure about his or her ability. Can and could also use possibility. For example, it could rain later. So if there is a possibility that we are going to have rain later, the temperature can rise this month. Based on what the temperature is this month, it can rise this month. May, might, both indicates possibility, but might can suggest that there is less possibility than may. For example, it may rain later, or it might rain later. Must indicates necessity. It must, or I must leave now. Should indicates obligation and probability. You should come home early. Let us look at the rules that govern modal auxiliary. Use as is, do not change. So whether it is in the present or the past or the future, you use the modal verbs as is. For example, let us look at this sentence. He can swim. We see that that's a very positive sentence. So it's obvious, or we can say it is clear. It is prescriptive. He can swim. There is something wrong with that sentence. So it's on the descriptive side. Let us look at rule number 2. Use base verb after modal. Do not use to. For example, he might join us. He might to join us. Just look at rule number 3. Use not after modals. Do not use don't. Doesn't, isn't, aren't, wasn't, or won't. For example, you should not smoke. B, you don't smoke. Have to is a semi-modal. Have to is a semi-modal. That means have to, it may have a similar meaning to modal, but it takes S in the third person singular. For example, he has to go now. Negative. And the questions are formed with auxiliary. For example, do you have to go now? So we see where the semi-modal verb would use in this sense. Please bear in mind though, that two modals cannot be in one sentence. Two modals or two modal verbs cannot be together in one sentence. That's it from me. Join me in our next series where we'll expound on modal auxiliary verbs to its entirety. Please bear in mind, let us recap, that the modal auxiliary verbs, they help the main verb to explain some aspect of ability, possibility, and probability. They are followed by an infinitive without or to. They haven't got S in the third person singular, and two modals cannot be together in the same sentence.